Welcome to Pilates is the Answer podcast, where you can discover the power of Pilates and how it can improve every aspect of your life. We are your hosts, Stacey Jernigan
and Pearl Dahmen, and we look forward to introducing and sharing all of the questions about which Pilates is the answer. If you haven't listened to part 1 of Pilates Head to Toe, then please go back and listen to that episode. This is the second half of that conversation. Once you've listened, join us for some more Pilates Head to Toe, covering alignment, benefits, and helpful cues. So in shoulder, we talked about shoulders, and then you came down. I did not pick bra fat. From where I grew up, we never really talked about it, and if we did, it was like, you don't want it. Yeah. So it did not resonate with me. I just made a group I called the torso.
There you go.
The torso. So I'm going to just tell you the things that are in the torso, because there's, obviously a lot of them, but we've got breathing and the diaphragm come from the torso. We've got our organ support. So the pelvic floor supports the organs. And if you're a woman of a certain age, that also can help either improve or stop incontinence. So having that pelvic floor strong. And if you're younger, the strong pelvic floor is good for pregnancy. So I felt like that was an important muscle, and obviously it is because we talk about it a lot too. And then flexibility in the thoracic spine. So opening your heart, ab strength, that's Pilates all about, right? Skeletal support. So that was the posture and alignment. So we've been talking about from, the chest up, but it's also posture alignment down through the torso. And then the core also supports our balance and the stability of our spine. So there's a lot of stuff in there. Probably should have broke it down, but, and then thoracic flexibility, which is all in there. Yeah. So I just kind of went this big chunk, lots of stuff happening.
And it's helpful from a cueing perspective too, because sometimes we do need to make sure we're cueing, move the entire torso, or we're not moving the torso. Whole what's stable, what's mobile can be really effective with cueing. And then I think sometimes it's helpful to cue the chest, keeping the chest open or leading with the chest, you know?
Yeah.
And of course, shoulder blades, we already kind of talked about that. And then the ribs.
Yeah.
So I think I know when I first started teaching when I was first going through my teacher training, trying to understand, when the instructor would cue moving from the ribs, I just didn't understand that. And now it's one of my favorite cues because it's so beneficial. Well, just like I'll say, move from the rib cage. Or your rib cage is turning away from your opposite hip, or something like if you're twisting, twisting to the right, you're pulling away from your left hip, something like that. And I think it really can help with those clients that struggle with leading from the head or the shoulders. So moving from the rib cage, knitting the ribs in and out.
The knitting the ribs again. My mother, my sister are knitters, crocheters. So knitting the ribs, it took me a while to realize what that meant. And, it's really just pulling your ribs in and not letting them pop.
Pulling in and up too. And that's the sensation that is difficult for people to master, is because they do think about that closed knit. Yes. In, but then it's a little bit of a lift up, and that's really what helps you use the core muscles to do it.
That makes sense, because knitting in pulled you into the round shoulders, whereas in and up, and I like that. Don't let them pop.
Yeah, because exactly.
That for me physically, then I go, I know where to do, and I know what makes them pop because I've done it a lot.
Yes. And then a lot of times, from a cueing perspective and from a core muscle activation perspective, that space that's between the bottom of the ribs and the top of the hips is important to help clients understand that when you're talking about like neutral spine, for example, which we talked a lot about that, is that space should stay the same when you are in neutral, whatever that space is. It's different on each of our bodies, but whatever that space is between the bottom ribs and the top of the hip bones, that should stay the same when you are doing things like movements of the legs, whether it's a core exercise, a footwork exercise, feet and straps, something like that. And that's really hard. That's hard to maintain. and it's hard to be aware of. So
Yeah.
that's an important way to think about helping people understand kind of a true neutral, a true pelvic stability. So I like that one. And then let's see, so we talked about ribs. I also like to divide the core into the upper and the lower sections, even though I know that's not anatomically necessarily correct, but it just does help people when you're doing like a chest lift, for example, or when you're doing supine arms, for example, and you're trying to get across the point of how lifting the head and shoulders is an option, and it changes the muscular activation. So sometimes it's important that we are doing exercises on our back where we do leave our head down, so that the focus is the lower abs and the obliques, and where you're not over functioning that rectus muscle, which is kind of like the upper core, because most people have a stronger rectus anyway, which is why that, you know, there's so much incidence of back pain and all of that.
And before they would have learned a Pilates, I know for myself, if you went to an exercise program or a workout program, sit-ups.
Exactly.
You know, and everybody has been schooled that rectus, the beautiful six-pack, are your abs, and they're not the ones that do the big spine protecting work.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So I think it's important for people to understand, how many different core muscles we actually have. And one of my favorite cues related to all of the 6 deep core muscles is that they're very lazy. That unless you are thinking about them and unless you're breathing deeply enough, most of them aren't going to do a darn thing. They're just going to relax.
So for our listeners who may not know as much about Pilates as we do, or getting started out, or they're just, you know, clients, practitioners, what are those 6 core muscles?
Well, there's different schools of thought behind this.
That's
but of course you have your rectus abdominis, and you have your transversus abdominis, which is the lower part.
Yeah, I like to call it seatbelt.
Yeah, seatbelt muscles, exactly. A lot of times instructors will say that. And then you have internal obliques and external obliques and pelvic floor. Now also diaphragm is one. And then there could be more also, because the multifidi that run along the spine, you know, those help too with posture and with, you know, supporting the spine. So there's a lot.
And then I've heard too, when you talk powerhouse, you got to pull the glutes and the quads into it too.
Inner thighs.
And that's kind of why I asked, because
you've got
I've read different things, you know, I've all different books, and different ones say different things. And so it's like, what's right? But, you know, I think in Pilates, there is no one answer. I mean, Pilates is the answer, but there is no one answer in Pilates.
I think it depends on the exercise that you're doing, right? And if it's, you know, if you're mostly focusing on the breathing, then it's going to relate to certain core exercise or certain core muscles, versus if it's a movement exercise, it relates to others. But I think that whole, like you're saying, powerhouse and core is a very significant portion of our body that we don't often think about. And that's what is really, truly one of the biggest benefits of Pilates, is that we're training our bodies, or retraining our bodies, I should say, to move from the core. And that's one of my favorite cues too, is you are initiating your movement from the core. You are moving from within, so that we're not over functioning the shoulders, and we're not over functioning the cervical spine or the lumbar spine.
Yeah. Well, I like to say the powerhouse does the work and the limbs follow.
There you go. Perfect. Yes. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. It comes from the powerhouse. The power is there, and then the limbs follow. It's not the opposite way around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yes, I think we covered a lot throughout the middle section of the body. Sometimes it's helpful to, you know, cue hip bones and things like that, just to get people in good alignment.
Yeah.
And then side glutes and gluteal fold is one of my favorite cues, which I
tell
stole
me
from
more.
Julie Turner.
Yeah, tell me more about gluteal fold.
So that's the crease at the top of the leg.
I know where it is,
bottom of the rear. And well, I think from my perspective, when you're teaching footwork or a squat, for example, so footwork would be on the reformer if you haven't done reformer before, and then squats can even just be standing up, or it kind of replicates footwork on the reformer. Or sorry, footwork on the reformer replicates squats.
Yes.
And so the goal is to find, you know, connection in your glutes. In particular, one of the strongest connections we have in the body is between the heels and the glutes. So pushing through the heels will help you find the glutes. A lot of people struggle, especially when you go to lift, either come out of a squat from a standing position, or even a bridge, you know, when you're lifting your hips up into a bridge or hip lift. people clench the glutes together. They clench their booty cheeks together.
Ah.
And that's really not good for your, as you mentioned earlier, bladder health and all that, or for your tailbone, putting pressure back there. But also it's not a proper activation of those muscles. So back to the pencil cue, if you cued something like, pretend like you're trying to break a pencil between the top of the leg, bottom of the rear on the right side and the left side independently of each other, as opposed to pulling them together and clenching. Because I have been in classes where an instructor has said, pretend like you're clenching $100 bill between your butt cheeks.
Yeah, or I've heard penny.
Yeah,
even,
and I'm thinking,
I've heard that
I
one
would never
too.
want to do that, number one. But also, that would make me clench. And no, we don't want to do that. So
it almost sounds like you should be initiating through the heel. And if you start pressing through the heel, it's going to end up in the right spot.
Yes. And the more you learn to activate those, it's really effective with lots of different exercises. And I'll even tell, clients, like even in a bridge, for example, like I would really rather you be in the lowest bridge ever, maybe not even lifting your hips and feel your glutes, as opposed to you lifting your hips up and not feeling your glutes and using your back instead.
I do the same kind of thing in squats. And I have this thing, I say, it's not how low you go, it's how deep you feel it.
And what you're feeling, right? And what you're using.
And so a shallow squat, you can feel deeper than a deep squat if you're not doing it right.
Yeah, what are you using? Because that's the thing, like with a squat, a lot of people use their knee joints. And if you have really healthy knee joints, you don't notice the difference. You don't feel it. So a lot of times clients will say, well, I don't feel anything.
Yeah.
But that just means they're using their joints and not their muscles. If you have, unhealthy or, damage in your knee joints, then you're going to feel it in your knees. But that's a good pain indicator from the body. We need to listen to those pain responses and go, okay, hold on. I need to get into better alignment. I might need a wider stance with my feet and legs. And I don't need to go down as far. I don't need as big of a range of motion, because that's what Pilates also is beneficial at helping us do, is learn to activate our muscles that support our joints. So you don't want to be going into such a range of motion that you're compromising using your joints, your spine, things like that.
Yeah, because, your joints are your joints. Your muscles you can build, you can grow, but your joints, they're there. You've got to take care of them.
You've only got, two knee joints. And,
exactly.
You don't want to have to have replacements.
No. Yeah. Quick thought on this one. So if you're doing a squat and you want them to work in their heels, would it make sense to say, lift your toes if you want to get deeper into your heels?
I think if they have something to hold on to and they're stable, that will work.
Yes. No, I would never say
but
it.
They should. But
when they have the bar, to hold on to.
But then you have to be careful too that they're not flexing their feet so much that they clench with their shins. So that's the thing. I think, I like to cue like toes lightly touching.
Okay.
And pressing through the heels. Okay. And finding the heel to glute connection.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And again, things I've heard and it resonated with me, but I didn't lift the front of my foot off the ground.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, you have good body awareness. You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And some of us are still building that. And
exactly.
So when you're still building that, if you take something literally like you're saying, or you actually think this is what they want me to do, they literally want me to do this at all cost. That's what we have to be careful of indicating when we're cueing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
This is just one tool that might help. And if this doesn't help, let's try another way. And that's why I've said before, like, maybe is one of my favorite cues. Maybe try this. If not, maybe try this. That kind of thing.
That sounds good.
Okay, so we did glutes, gluteal fold, side glutes. Yeah. And all those are very beneficial muscles in supporting the hips, knees, back, all of that. What else?
And then we get down to the knees.
Yeah, I think
so. The knees. And so,
well, before we go there, because I'm thinking if you're laying on your back, we still need to do like wrists, elbows.
Oh, okay. Oh, we didn't do. So we haven't gotten to the limbs. We got to the torso, but we really haven't gotten into the limbs.
Arms. Because even if you're laying down, you want good alignment, like we talked about, and sometimes pressing into the pinkies will help with that. If you're pulling onto the roll down bar or weights or straps or anything, pressing into the ring or magic circle, or the ball, like you mentioned
keeping
earlier.
the wrist straight rather than breaking them or bending them.
Yes. And then also sometimes people do have a hard time finding those armpit bra fat muscles, and pressing into the pinky side helps with that. So that's a good one.
Yeah.
And then, so then quads, of course, quads and hamstrings are good for people to just understand where those are and how to use those and how to not overfunction the quads. I think that can be helpful. And then right above the knee, that VMO that helps track the knee in good alignment. That can be good when you're straightening the leg, to help people that have tendency to lock out the knee. Again, going back to overfunctioning the knee joint as opposed to squeezing the muscle right above. So that's a helpful one.
All righty. Yeah. And then lower leg, below the knee, calves.
And also the knees can be a good alignment tool for, knees should be pointing toward the ceiling, or knees should be tracking over your second and third toes, or
knees in line with your shoulders.
Yeah,
for example, during footwork. Yeah.
And then, ankle, calves. Sometimes I think even like in bridging, I've found that a lot of people struggle with overfunctioning their calves during bridging. So that can be a helpful cue. I want you to mostly feel glutes, try to relax your calves, something like that.
Yeah. We do nice calf stretches in footwork. But calves, we don't spend, most people, their calves are probably as tight as I know for me, calves are always tight. I've got to stretch them out. And so if you have, in my case, I have German background. I inherited the German musculature for legs. I like to say men would kill for my calves. I do not.
Okay,
have
mine
skinny
are way
calves.
bigger than yours. I have Polish in me, and
so you got this.
So
I joke about that. I used to say when I was young, I won't date a man with calves smaller than mine.
Oh, how funny!
Because I didn't want to feel. I didn't know what to feel, because I've always felt self-conscious about it. But they're really strong. Now I know it's a good thing because it supports my knees and ankles and balance.
That's right.
But vanity is a different thing than utility.
Yes,
all right,
this is true. There's a guy that does research where he relates muscles to emotions and muscles to different areas in the body that have difficulties. So it's something related. It's the quads are related to anger. If you're holding anger within the body, that you should roll out your quads. And then with the calves, he says the calves are like the window to the hips. So if you have any hip issues, that rolling out the calves can be helpful. Not necessarily heal it, but can help with hip issues.
Yeah. Another thing with the calves that I saw the other day, which is very interesting and made me feel good about having nice sized calves, is that it was some doctor that said calves are your second heart. And so because they pump the blood back up to the heart, so having strong calves helps to get that blood back to the heart. So I'm like, oh, that's good. So I'm reimagining my body.
Yeah, good. You should. You look amazing. Okay, so ankles and you've mentioned earlier,
ankle
stability and balance and all that. And that's why we do so much footwork, and why we do Pilates without shoes, because it's really helpful with all of the building all the musculature in the feet and the ankles and all those supporting muscles in the arches. And so, I mean, the feet are our foundation.
Yes, you said exactly what I was thinking. It's like the foundation on a house. If you don't take care of your feet, it's just going to go all the way up the rest of the way. I mean, including people that have plantar fasciitis, neuroma, those kind of things. By moving your feet, you can, do things. I have battled a little bit with a bunion, and I actually have Joseph Pilates. I forget the toe gadget thing. The toe corrector. And I use that constantly.
That's good.
And I've been working, and my feet are so much more flexible and don't hurt as much. And when I actually first started teaching, I started being concerned. I could start feeling plantar fasciitis try to sneak in on me. No, not there. I did all the, the rolling and the footwork and all the things that you need to do to keep those feet healthy, because if you've got to do 2 or 3 or 4 classes or more in a row, the last thing you want hurting is your feet.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is a lot of us, even if you wear really good shoes, your feet are still cramped up in those shoes. So the footwork and even just being barefoot. And I like the toe socks that spread the toes out, because it really helps. It helps with balance, but it helps with alignment as well. And especially when somebody has a bunion or has been like a dancer in a previous life, their toes are used to curling together.
Well, and our shoes, okay, so feet, I had some feet fetish for a while. My own only, my own. I was trying to figure out what was going on. And so I did some, research, looking things up. And we're born, our feet go out to a V. The toes are really wide. And then we put them in shoes and they press in, press in, press in. And so some doctors, yoga, whatever, they suggest toe separators to wear those. And I actually do that a lot too. And since I've used toe separators and Pilates footwork and the little toe gizmo, my toes are spread. They're very flexible. So all of that makes a big
important.
difference.
I see a lot of clients who can't separate their toes. So I do recommend, I'm like, just wear, if they don't like the toe socks, bringing them to class or, to sessions. Sometimes they're embarrassed. They're like, oh, my toes don't look good. And I'm like, well, just wear them at home. Wear them for an hour at home. It'll make a big difference. So we talked about that. So, and sometimes it's important to give cues where you're talking about the toes. Sometimes we want them to grip their toes, and sometimes we don't relax the toes or spread the toes out or be soft in the toes, because our toes will end up helping us balance, and our toe joints will overfunction as opposed to the muscles doing the work.
So one of the things I see a lot, you tell people, flex I would say flex your feet from your ankles, toes towards your shins. Many people believe that toes towards your shins is mean curling your toes. One day I looked down the aisle and I thought I had elves in the room. Everybody's toes were curled up. And so it's like, relax your toes, flex from the ankle. So I know exactly what you're saying.
Yep. And then also just even from standing or doing footwork or doing bridging, I think helping people bring awareness into making sure that they're pressing, of course, evenly into both feet, but also evenly onto both sides of the foot. If they're on the foot bar, a smaller portion, then, pressing onto both sides. But if they're standing or doing footwork on a jump board or something like that, or doing bridging where their feet are on a flat surface, more surface area, pressing onto all four corners of the foot. Because a lot of times people will do that pronation or supination, rolling out or rolling in. So pressing onto both sides of the ball of the foot and both sides of the heel of the foot can be a helpful cue.
Well, and again, I'm going to go back to my bunion I've been tackling. I started to supinate because standing even was
putting
pressure on it. So my body, and I didn't even realize it. My body just compensated for it. And I started realizing it, and I'm trying to combat getting back. And of course, that then compromised my balance.
And that's what is so fascinating about the body, is that it will just kind of on its own, without you being aware, without you having to think about it, make those changes, which is why something like Pilates is so helpful, because you bring your body back into, well, number one, the awareness, but then also the better alignment and knowing where those dysfunctional patterns are, and then literally rewiring them.
So exactly. And so what happens is the body gradually shifts to compensate. And as it shifts, something else gets compromised. And then you feel that pain in the other thing. And so you go tackle that and not even realizing it comes somewhere else. A long time ago, I learned that issues zigzag up the body. So if something's happened in your right foot, your left knee is going to bother you. If your left knee has a problem, then it pings up to your right. And it just zigzags up and down the body because the other side is compensating. So if you start to feel a pain or a twinge or something, it's maybe not where you're feeling it. Maybe it's because that's compensating and it's tired.
It's initiating from somewhere else. That's so true. Okay, do you want to circle back to the head?
Let's circle back to the head, because so for me, and we talk about this, we're building new neural paths. We're training our body, our muscles, to automatically go to those right alignments as opposed to where they were. Stress release. And we've talked about, we talked about the vagus nerve, about stress and all of that. And just coming to Pilates and relaxing and breathing calms all of that down. And so, we always talk of people like they say they're addicted. They love it. They love to come back. And I really think that they don't realize that Pilates has just forced them to slow down, and that feels so good. They want more. And it's disguised as exercise.
Well, and I think too, it relates back to our podcasts with Julie Turner and Dr. Chris about the parasympathetic nervous system.
Right.
And so it truly does have an impact on that regulating of our body and bringing it back to its natural calmer state.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a benefit that we don't even realize is happening, or we don't even have to think about, just by nature of the mindfulness and the breathing and realigning the vagal nerve and the body in general. That just is an added benefit that you get.
Yeah. And I think that, so for me, especially at an end of a class, when someone says it's over, and we were just I was in the flow, they were in the flow. I like to call it a moving meditation, because basically a meditation is just clearing your mind and focusing on something for that period of time. And so for the class, they're focusing on their body and feeling what's going on, and the outside world goes away. And that's all meditation is.
Yeah.
So that's,
Cool. Yeah.
So
very good. All right. So then we did a full circle body scan. So we covered benefits as well as helpful cues for instructors thinking about helping with alignment and also helping with relaying the purpose.
And for those that just are taking Pilates, some insights into why we're cueing what we're cueing and how we're trying to help them.
Purpose and the benefits. Perfect. All right.
Great.
Cool. Well, and so we would love to hear from our listeners if there are favorite benefits of Pilates that you've experienced, or instructors, if there are favorite cues that you like that relate to the body scan or benefits of Pilates. We would love to hear.
Yes. And who knows, we might even steal them.
That's right. Exactly. It's a group effort.
There you go. So thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and thank you for tuning in. For more information, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Pilates is the Answer, and on the web at pilatesistheanswer.com.
Feel free to message us with questions for which you are searching the answer. We would love for you to follow our podcast, leave a kind review, and lots of stars.